Hi, Scott Orlin with Cinema-Magazin. The new movie coming your way is called The Half of It. And, well, it totally wouldn't be possible without the talents of our next guest, and that is writer-director Alice Wu. Congratulations. Let me ask you, in my limited literature background, there seems to be a lot of Cyrano in its DNA.
Yes.
Can you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that?
Yeah. No, it's very obviously modern take on Cyrano. And in a way, because in the film itself, there's so many call outs to different parts of literature or film or music from different eras. And I think that's, in a way, it's my attempt to try and make a timeless love story, right? But it's a kind of love story where there's a bit of a twist. Because in Cyrano, the whole thing is about someone who is too scared to announce their love for somebody else, while another person that it seems much more, whether they're more handsome or somehow more appropriate to woo that person, like helps that person woo the object of their affection. And in it, you'd think like, okay, is the issue gonna be who's gonna end up with the girl? But really, this turns out to be the kind of love story where in the process of trying to get the girl, I think all three people end up learning something about love and about themselves that allows them to move their lives forward. So it ends up being less of a classic romantic comedy and more of a slightly subversive kind of a journey of one's own self-discovery.
Uh, you and I are just a few years out of high school. But I'm wondering, how comfortable were you with modern day high school language and attitude?
Oh, it's so funny. So I teach improv just for fun, right? But I tend to have an ear for dialogue in general. But I will admit that when I was writing this, it wasn't like I was writing like, what would teens say, right? Because the thing is, teens are just people. Teens are just people who use certain things. I happen to know, like, because my students use Venmo or whatever. They're not high schoolers, they're in their 20s, but they've totally taught me all these things about like what like the textures of their life look like. And certainly I have friends who either they have teenagers or have become friends with people who are teens. And in talking to them, what I'm always struck by is how sophisticated they are. I think sometimes modern day media will show teens as being somehow shallow or that they all have, as if their emotions are shallow. But the thing that I think that's fascinating about teens is their emotions are just huge and big, and they're adult emotions. They might not have the words to figure out how to describe them yet. But I think those emotions are no less developed than the ones that we have later. And if anything, I would say as an adult, that when we're faced with something scary, like we have to ask out a crush, we regress to being a teen, right? So I just write the characters as like the most authentic humans I can, using the textures of their life. And the funny thing is, immediately, like friends of mine who have teens, or I had like a teen who was like, yeah, this is exactly how we talk. But I wasn't really consciously thinking, how do I do that? I think, again, they're just people.
One of the representations that you kind of show, which literally Hollywood doesn't do that often, is Asian culture.
Mhm.
Talk a little bit about, because it's very subtle throughout, but yet we see some sadly prejudices that kind of seep
Sure, sure.
through. Talk about how important that was to show this representation.
Yeah, I think for me, because I'm an Asian gay woman. I'm an Asian lesbian. When I wake up in the morning, I don't think another day to face racism or another day to face homophobia, right? Like I think, okay, I have to get up, I have to like make my breakfast. Like I just think all the things anybody else thinks. However, it's also true that like I'd be naive if I didn't pretend that there haven't been things when I was growing up or things that I face when I go out into the world that maybe someone else of a different, whether it's like a different, race or a different, background of some sort. And so what I try and do is I try and find the authentic textures of those things. So it's not like every moment this character doesn't wander around being like, oh, how racism has crushed me. But it would be unrealistic to show her life without any heckling from people, especially in a town where they're literally the only immigrants who live in this small white town. Like that's going to be the textures of that of what life is. It's not menacing. It's just like not, it's not welcoming either, but it's also just real life. And so I just sort of write as closely as possible to what I've experienced and what I see other people experience.
Just a really quick last question. Do you miss Microsoft at all? working for the.
It's so long ago. I miss people. None of them are there anymore either. No, it was a perfect place for, like, if I had to have a corporate job, I actually did a great job. But I'm much happier telling stories.
Well, we're glad you are, Alice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott.
On behalf of it, and this is Scott Orlin.
All right. Thanks.